When I woke up from a coma, I didn't see my family. I didn't see doctors. The first thing I saw was a bank alert on my phone. Account balance, $0. $850,000 gone. The lottery money I had won 3 days before the accident?
Erased.
Stolen. And the signature on every withdrawal belonged to the last person I ever expected to betray me. My brother. But he didn't steal it overnight. He didn't panic and make one reckless decision. He planned it. He positioned himself. He waited for an opportunity, and when fate handed him one, he took everything. Here's how his mask started to crack. 3 days before the accident, my life was painfully ordinary. I wasn't manifesting wealth or feeling lucky. I went into a convenience store because I needed deodorant. The cashier asked if I wanted to add a lottery ticket. I almost said no. I bought it just to end the conversation. The next morning, half asleep, I checked the numbers. 1 matched. 2 matched. 3, 4, 5. My heart didn't race, it froze. Like my body didn't know how to react. I called my parents immediately. My mom cried. My dad kept asking if the numbers were from the right draw. Then my brother showed up. He hugged me like someone congratulating a funeral guest. Too tight, too long, too calculated. And his first words weren't, "I'm proud of you." They were, "You should let me help you manage this." Nobody asks for financial access before the money even clears. Nobody. Within minutes, he was grilling me like a bank employee. Which account are you using? Do you have a financial advisor? Do you trust your current bank? Do you have your login details written somewhere safe? He was speaking too fast, smiling too hard, acting like the money was already partially his. I brushed it off at first. Big news makes people weird, right? But then he dropped the line that snapped the room in half. You should name someone responsible if anything happens to you. Temporarily. Who brings up your hypothetical death 3 days after you win the lottery? I didn't fight him. I didn't confront him. I told him I'd think about it just to shut down the conversation. I was overwhelmed, not suspicious. That was my mistake. The night everything changed, I left my apartment around 9 p.m. to meet a friend for dinner. As I locked my door, my phone buzzed with a message from my brother. Just trust me. You need my help with this. I ignored it. 5 minutes later, my life detonated. I was halfway through an intersection when a drunk driver blasted through a red light at full speed.
Headlights. Screech.
Impact. Metal crushing bone. My body didn't feel pain, it felt like it stopped existing. And then everything went silent. I didn't dream. I didn't think. I didn't drift in some peaceful void. I simply disappeared for 6 weeks. When I opened my eyes again, my mother was asleep in a chair beside me. A nurse adjusted machines. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But my phone was on the table, screen lighting up with notifications. The first alert I opened wasn't a "glad you're awake" message. It was a warning. Unusual activity detected. Large withdrawals initiated. Power of attorney updated. My stomach dropped before I even processed the words. Then I saw the final notification. Your account balance is now $0. $850,000. My miracle was gone. And my brother had legally positioned himself to take it. But the part that broke me wasn't the theft. It was discovering the exact moment he decided my coma was his opportunity. And that moment is worse than the accident itself. When I woke up, the room felt wrong. Too bright, too quiet, too sterile. I didn't know where I was or how long I'd been there. My body was not pain, it was absence. Like everything had been disconnected and only half plugged back in. I turned my head and saw my brother in the chair beside me. No relief on his face. No surprise that I was conscious. Just stillness. Like he'd been waiting for a job to resume.
He didn't ask how I felt.
He didn't say. He was glad I was awake. His first line was, "Don't worry about anything. I've been handling your stuff."
No explicación.
No details. Just a statement of control. I asked for my phone. He didn't hesitate. He just said, "You don't need it yet," and slid it deeper into his pocket. That told me everything before I saw a single bank alert. My parents walked in a minute later. Their reactions were human: relief, tears, shock. My brother stayed behind them, hands in his pockets, silent, like a person who hoped I'd stay unconscious just a little longer. Hours passed before a nurse brought me my phone. Not because he gave it to her, because she found it in a drawer where he'd hidden it. The screen lit up the moment I touched it. The first notification didn't make sense. Unusual account activity detected. The second one hit harder. Large withdrawal flagged for review. Then the third. Balance, $0. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt clinical. Numbers don't lie. I opened the app. Page after page of transfers. All authorized. All neat. All signed. Not by me. And every withdrawal date lined up with one timeline. 3 hours after my accident, the money started moving. 3 hours. You don't act that fast unless you were waiting for the opportunity. He didn't panic. He executed. I didn't scream or cry. I asked him straight, "Where's my money?" He kept his voice low, like talking to someone fragile. "You're confused. You had me move it before the accident. You don't remember." I told him to bring me the paperwork. He sighed, annoyed, like I was slowing him down. Then he pulled out a folder from his bag and handed it to me like it was proof he'd cleaned the kitchen. Inside was a printed document with a near-perfect version of my signature. Not identical, just close enough. He didn't defend it. He didn't over-explain. He just said, "This is what you signed. You weren't in a good headspace that day." That line wasn't meant to convince me. It was meant to make everyone else in the room doubt me. My parents walked in mid-conversation. My dad asked what was going on. My brother stepped into the caretaker role instantly. Softer voice, lowered shoulders, fake concern. "She's mixing things up." The doctor said that might happen. He didn't look at me while he said it. He didn't have to. He already knew the advantage he had. I was injured, disoriented, vulnerable, and he'd built a narrative before I woke up. When they left the room again, I checked the transaction history. Every major purchase had a timestamp. He didn't just move the money. He used it. Cash withdrawals in the tens of thousands. Wire transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. Payments to dealerships. A transfer labeled property escrow. Numbers that should have triggered a fraud investigation stayed untouched because he had paperwork that made it look authorized. He planned this down to the hour. The second he found out I might die, he acted like I already had. Nothing about it was sloppy. Nothing about it was emotional. It was business, and I was the asset he liquidated. I spent that night replaying every interaction from the moment I won. The questions he asked, the urgency, the insistence that someone responsible should have access. He wasn't being protective. He was preparing. And the worst part? The withdrawals weren't the shocking piece. It was where the money went, and who was helping him spend it, and that didn't take long to uncover. Because the first clue came from a place I never expected: social media. And once I saw it, there was no going back. The first real shift happened because of something small, an Instagram story I shouldn't have watched but did anyway. My brother's girlfriend had posted a short clip from a shopping mall. Nothing special, just her smiling and holding multiple branded bags. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have connected anything. But the timing bothered me. The purchases were recent, and I knew her income wasn't high enough to justify luxury shopping sprees back to back. It wasn't evidence, just noise. But when your money disappears, noise becomes worth analyzing. I went back through her recent posts. They weren't incriminating, just financially inconsistent for someone with her job. That was enough to justify looking deeper. I hired a forensic accountant privately. Not because I was expecting a dramatic revelation, but because I wanted a neutral professional to map out the cash flow. Someone who didn't care about family politics, excuses, or feelings. When I gave him the bank statements, he didn't give me a speech. He just nodded once, asked 2 clarifying questions, and said he'd need 48 hours. He came back in 36. He laid everything out without emotional framing. Multiple ATM withdrawals clustered unnaturally close together. Transfers made at hours I was sedated or asleep during recovery. Locations that matched neither my routine nor my physical capability at the time. A consistent pattern of round number cash movements, which usually indicates concealment, not spending. Not one of his sentences was dramatic. He stuck to facts, probabilities, and documented behavior patterns. His tone alone told me the numbers were pointing somewhere predictable. Then he pointed out something I hadn't considered. My brother's debit card had been used at a store within minutes of a withdrawal from my account. Not the same purchase, not the same transaction. But the timeline was close enough to raise suspicion. He didn't call it proof. He called it a correlation that needs direct questioning. So I questioned it, but not directly. I tested him with something simple. I asked if he had bought anything from that specific store recently. Not an accusation, just a casual question dropped into a conversation about nothing. His reaction was immediate. Not defensive. Not angry. Just too fast. Too rehearsed. Too careful. People who are innocent take time to think. People who are guilty try to respond faster than their brain can calculate. He gave a long explanation that didn't match the simplicity of the question. It wasn't aggressive, just unnecessarily detailed. It wasn't proof, but it confirmed what the data already suggested. He was aware of something he shouldn't be aware of. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue. I didn't mention money. I just let him talk. Then I used what the accountant advised: document markers, not accusations. I asked my brother to help me reconstruct timelines for insurance purposes. A boring task. A chore nobody wants to do unless they're scared to refuse. He agreed too quickly. When someone is innocent, they negotiate. When someone is guilty, they over-cooperate. Over the next few days, I fed him harmless questions: dates, locations, receipts. None of these mattered on their own. They mattered because his answers kept shifting by small degrees. Not enough to look like lies, but enough to show he was building versions instead of recalling facts. At that point, I didn't need a confession. I needed an inconsistency big enough to involve authorities without drama. I got it when the accountant flagged a second correlation. Another withdrawal and another purchase. This time, the purchase wasn't his, it was his girlfriend's. And the timestamps aligned close enough to treat it as a pattern, not chance. I didn't confront him. I took the full documentation to the police. No speeches, no family meetings, no ultimatums. They processed it without theatrics. They didn't promise anything. They just took the statements, the evidence, and the accountant's report. The next step didn't involve me. The first person they contacted wasn't my brother. And that's where everything shifted. The day after the hospital discharge debacle, I met the forensic accountant. He was practical, direct, and uninterested in anything except numbers.
Perfect.
He asked for access to my banking app, card statements, ATM activity, and any screenshots I had taken. I gave him everything without commentary. He didn't need emotional context. He needed data. Within the first hour, he'd already identified the pattern I had missed: small withdrawals paired with larger point-of-sale transactions, testing limits, then exploiting them. He organized all of it into a spreadsheet, color-coded by risk level. I didn't ask what any of it meant. He explained only what mattered. The behavior wasn't random. It was planned. The more he dug, the more the timeline tightened. Every unauthorized transaction fell into windows where I was immobile, sedated, or physically incapable of leaving the hospital. The charges weren't subtle either. They were consistent, repetitive, predictable, routine enough that whoever did it assumed I'd never check. He printed a clean breakdown. ATM withdrawals. Always early mornings. Online orders. Electronics, gaming gear, subscription boxes. Physical purchases. Running shoes, restaurant bills, fuel. Transfers. 3 direct moves to an account not in my name. He pointed to the transfers. These alone establish intentional misuse. No drama, just fact. By the second day, he had reconstructed the full spending path, from my hospital admission to the day I confronted my brother. There was no ambiguity left. The transactions aligned with his driving routes, his work breaks, and even the nights he claimed to sleep at the hospital. While he analyzed, my brother shifted. He started acting unsettled. He texted more. Shorter messages. Fewer calls. Less confidence. He wasn't asking about my health anymore. He was asking what I was working on and whether I still needed help gathering insurance paperwork. The accountant noticed the timing of his inquiries. He knows the pattern is closing, he said, not as speculation but as observation. On day 3, the cover-up attempt started. My brother tried resetting passwords on 2 of my accounts. He failed both attempts because I had already changed them after the bank flagged suspicious activity. He tried logging into my email twice. He tried removing a device from my Apple ID. All logged. All timestamped. The accountant didn't react. He just added the attempts to the evidence folder. Once the financial reconstruction was done, he advised me to get a recorded statement from my brother. Not a confrontation. Not an argument. A controlled, neutral conversation where he spoke freely. So I set it up. I invited him over under the pretext of needing help with insurance questions. He came fast, too fast. He sat down acting casual, but his eyes kept scanning for paperwork. I kept the tone flat. I let him talk first. He asked if the insurance company had said anything weird. He asked if the bank had sorted out the mistake. He asked if I was still confused about some withdrawals. I didn't accuse him. I didn't imply anything. I just repeated his questions back to him, which forced him to expand his explanations. The accountant had told me, he'll try to control the story. Let him. And he did. He explained inconsistencies I hadn't asked about. He mentioned stores I hadn't referenced. He denied things I hadn't brought up. Every unnecessary detail worked against him. By the end of the conversation, I had 22 minutes of clean, uninterrupted audio where he contradicted himself 7 times and admitted to using my card, without thinking, on 3 separate dates. That was all the police needed to move forward with charges. Filing them wasn't dramatic. It took 40 minutes and a straightforward conversation with the officer handling financial crimes. They didn't promise immediate action. They didn't dramatize anything. They just documented, verified, and explained the next steps. The fallout with my family happened faster than the legal process. My mother refused to believe any of it. She said I was overreacting after the accident. My father stayed silent, which said enough. My brother stopped pretending and shifted straight into hostility. Extended family split without even asking for details. None of that mattered. The evidence was clean. And the investigation had officially moved from suspicion to case status. Once the police converted my evidence into an active case file, everything shifted from suspicion to process. There was nothing dramatic about it. Just procedure. That's what makes financial crime both brutal and efficient. The system doesn't need emotion to destroy someone. It only needs documentation. The detective assigned to my case walked me through the timeline. They would interview my brother again, gather corroborating statements, request the security footage the accountant identified, and verify the device logs showing his attempts to access my accounts. Nothing fancy. Just structured verification. My brother responded exactly how the detective predicted he would. He escalated his lies. He tried to explain the forged signature as a mix-up with hospital forms. He blamed the girlfriend for the Amazon purchases. He blamed a friend for the ATM withdrawals. Then he tried the sympathy angle, claiming he was under stress and helping manage things. The detective didn't challenge him. That wasn't their job. Their job was to listen, let him contradict the evidence, and document everything. While the police built their side, my forensic accountant finalized the financial packet. He didn't add commentary. He didn't speculate. Every page was just transactions, timestamps, device IDs, IP addresses, and GPS correlations. It was the cleanest dismantling of a lie I'd ever seen. When I asked him how solid the case looked, he didn't give me reassurance. He just said, "There is no version of these numbers that absolves him." That was the closest thing to comfort I would get. 2 days later, my brother made his first real mistake. He showed up at my apartment without warning. No text. No call. Just knocked on my door like nothing had shifted. His energy wasn't angry yet, just nervous. The kind of nervous that comes from realizing the room is smaller than you thought. He tried to make small talk, asked how I was feeling, tried to look around the apartment like he expected to see paperwork lying around. I didn't invite him in. I didn't speak more than necessary. The accountant had advised it. Do not fill silence. Let him reveal what he fears. Eventually he did. He asked, too directly, if the bank had given any update. Then, if the accident might have made you misremember some things. Then, if we should fix this privately before it becomes a bigger misunderstanding. He used the word misunderstanding 3 times. People only repeat words when they're trying to overwrite something. I kept my answers minimal, not cold, neutral, the same tone I'd used to confirm an appointment reminder. He switched tactics fast. The moment persuasion didn't work, he pushed blame. He said maybe someone else had my wallet before the accident. He said hospitals are chaotic and anyone could have gotten access. The shift was predictable. The detective told me most suspects move from concern, persuasion, pressure, anger. He made it to step 3 before I cut the conversation off. He didn't leave quietly. He muttered something about family turning on family, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The detective already had the recording of his first contradictions. This conversation only added motive. The arrest wasn't theatrical. It happened the next afternoon. A neighbor texted me that police cars were outside my parents' house. 15 minutes later, the detective confirmed they had taken him into custody for felony misuse of funds, forgery, and identity fraud. My mother called immediately, not to ask how I was doing, not to ask for clarification, just to accuse me of ruining the family. My father didn't call at all, which told me he knew the truth, but didn't want the responsibility of acknowledging it. The girlfriend folded instantly. She admitted her part, identified every item he bought for her, and provided screenshots without resistance. She wasn't loyal. She was minimizing her own exposure. The prosecution didn't waste time. They laid out the charges, the financial reconstruction, the device logs, the recordings, and the forged signature. There was no narrative attached, just facts. That's the part that breaks people. They expect drama. They get spreadsheets. My brother tried every angle in court. Confusion, stress, accidental misuse, emotional strain. None of it mattered. There were too many aligned timestamps, too many location matches, too many withdrawals made while I was sedated, too many contradictions in his own recorded statements. The judge didn't give a speech,
Didn't scold him.
didn't moralize. She just read the charges and stated the evidence satisfied the burden. That was it. And sitting there, watching him finally understand the weight of what he'd done, I realized something simple. The accident didn't break my life.
He did.
And the system was finally catching up to him. Court wasn't a dramatic climax. It was administrative. Half of the room didn't even look up from their paperwork. That's how justice works in real life. Quiet, procedural, indifferent to emotion. The prosecution presented the case exactly the way the accountant structured it, transaction by transaction, timestamp by timestamp. My brother's attorney tried to argue mental strain, financial confusion, and temporary responsibility under pressure. None of it mattered. A forged signature and a 6-week spending spree don't leave much room for interpretation. When the judge delivered the sentence, her tone didn't change. 8 years. Mandatory restitution. There was no shock in the room except his. His face didn't show guilt. Not regret. Just the realization that he had gambled and lost badly. He looked at me once, not with apology, but with the frustration of someone who couldn't believe the consequence actually landed on him. That's the kind of entitlement that lets someone drain their own sister's bank account while she's unconscious. My mother cried. Not for me. Not for the stolen money. She cried because her son was going to prison. My father kept his eyes down. He didn't defend me, didn't defend him, just avoided the responsibility of choosing a side. Some families fracture loudly. Ours fractured through silence. After sentencing, the restitution process started. No part of it was simple, but it was predictable. Liquidation of assets. Recovery of the girlfriend's items. Seizure of the vehicles he bought. Reverse tracing of the withdrawal path. The accountant handled the structure. The prosecutor handled the enforcement. My job was to show up, provide documentation, and stay consistent. Within 3 months, 70% of the funds were recovered. Not because he tried to return them, because every purchase he made was reckless and easy to claw back. Cars depreciate. Electronics break. Vacations don't refund. But property, transfers, and traceable purchases gave the state enough leverage to force the majority back. The final 30% came slower. Civil action. Insurance offsets. A small fund set up by the court that would pull from his wages once he started prison labor. It wasn't fast, but it was inevitable. Money doesn't care about relationships. It follows paperwork. The day the final restitution letter arrived, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt neutral. I got my life back financially, but the damage wasn't numbers. It was permanence. Trust doesn't regenerate like bank balances do. Rebuilding wasn't dramatic either. I paid my medical bills. I moved. I hired a real financial advisor. I set up protections my past self didn't know existed. I watched my accounts like a guard dog. I changed passwords, then changed them again. When you've been robbed by someone you grew up with, caution becomes muscle memory. People asked if I visited him in prison. I didn't. Not because I wanted revenge, but because there was nothing left to talk about. When someone drains your accounts while you're unconscious, the relationship ends at the moment they authorize the first withdrawal. He sent one letter during his first month inside. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. It was a complaint about how harsh the sentencing was, about how I didn't understand the pressure, about how I could have fixed this without courts. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The system already had. His girlfriend left him within weeks. She cooperated fully. She rebuilt her life separately. My parents kept trying to convince me to heal the family, but they never acknowledged what he did. You can't fix something people refuse to admit is broken. As for him, 8 years is a long time to sit with your own choices. He's lost his job, his financial future, his social circle, and the illusion that he could manipulate his way out of consequences. Prison didn't destroy his life.
He did.
The sentence just confirmed it. The irony is simple. He wanted access to money he didn't earn. He ended up with a prison cell. He absolutely did. When people hear my story, they always focus on the accident or the betrayal or the stolen money. But that's not the real core. The core is this. You never really know someone until they think you can't fight back. The mistake he made wasn't stealing. It was assuming I'd stay unconscious, physically, legally, and mentally. I didn't.